Menstrual cycle tracking apps have revolutionized the way women connect with their bodies, promising insight, self-knowledge, and personal empowerment. But what happens when the very tools initially designed to liberate us quietly change their business model to one that commodifies our most intimate information under the illusion of empowerment? That's exactly what we'll be exploring today using real case studies from some of your favorite apps. Hi, my name's Kim and I'm a fertility scientist and women's health advocate. If you've ever tracked your period in an app, you'll want to keep watching. In the past decade, menstrual cycle tracking apps have become some of the most downloaded health tools around the world, with tens of millions using them to log periods, track symptoms, and learn about their body. These apps are often marketed through paid influencer endorsements and targeted advertising, with each app competing to be the one that helps you to know your body. Menstrual cycle tracking apps belong to a rapidly growing industry known as FemTech, technology designed to fill the long-standing void in women's health. And on the surface, it seems like powerful progress. After centuries of women's health, and in particular menstrual health, being ignored, hidden, and taboo, they offered something that felt radical in its simplicity: knowledge and understanding. And for many, that self-knowledge was true liberation. This is the story of how something that began as empowerment, revolutionary and long overdue, became swept up in a wave of rapid tech innovation. And in that momentum, some femtech companies saw a moment to serve, while others saw a market to exploit. In this video, we'll explore the loopholes that exist in a largely unregulated industry and why this matters, not just for our privacy, but for our health and the future of our reproductive autonomy. Chapter 1: The promise of period tracking, a need for knowledge and the rise of the tools that claim to deliver it. Let's start at the very beginning. There was a time when tracking your cycle meant keeping handwritten charts with dates, temperatures, and symptoms, or marks made in paper calendars. It's hard to imagine now, but cycle tracking apps have been around for little over a decade, so until very recently, paper tracking was all we had. Then in 2011, a digital alternative appeared, Kindara, an app that brought the practice of fertility awareness into the digital age. It didn't provide insights or predictions like many of the modern apps. The tool was simply a well-organized digital notebook to record and display your fertility data, and it was adored by women who were already practicing fertility awareness method. Then in 2013, Clue and Glow arrived, followed by the launch of Flow in 2015. These apps didn't just help users track their periods, they helped to bring cycle tracking into the mainstream, turning what was once a private paper calendar into a seamless digital experience. These apps were simple, intuitive, and designed for the everyday user. This innovation was embraced by women worldwide, spreading largely via word of mouth. For many women, it was the first time they'd ever logged a period or tracked a symptom, and these apps provided a launching pad for millions of women to finally understand their bodies. This led to rapid acceleration. More and more apps popped up one after the other, and today these apps are more than calendars. Some act like AI health assistants, some offer personalized insights into your health, mood, fitness cravings, and even your productivity. The burden of learning our bodies is no longer on us. We turn to these apps to tell us what we should be experiencing at any given time. After decades of being told that our cycles were a problem to be fixed, menstrual cycle tracking apps offered something new, a chance to be curious and self-aware. But here's what most of us didn't realize. Every symptom logged, every mood tracked, every note about sex, sleep, or cravings, it's all data. And not just any data, it's some of the most intimate and personal data we could ever share. And it's being gathered outside of a medical context, without the oversight or protections we'd expect from a healthcare setting. The truth is, not all apps are built with the same values, or with the same intentions of what they'll do with that data. Some apps are created in collaboration with scientists, doctors, and even universities, contributing to long overdue research in women's health. Others are created by designers, entrepreneurs, or venture-backed teams with seemingly different goals. At first glance, they might all seem the same: supportive, educational, and beautifully designed. But in the end, it's not the surface design that defines ethical care and good intention. It's the systems beneath it, the people behind it, what's prioritized, and who the app is really built to serve. If this already has you thinking twice, go ahead and hit the like button. It will help this video reach more people that need to see this. Before we dive into the first case study, I want to make this so crystal clear. I never set out to expose anything or anyone, but during my research, I noticed something. Certain claims just didn't add up. Privacy promises felt intentionally vague, and the deeper I looked, the more I realized how easy it is for an app to say all of the right things without ever being held accountable to it, or having to prove that they actually follow through with the claims and promises that they make. So with that, I'll give a very important disclaimer that the information in this video is my personal critical review of publicly available information and reflects my personal opinion. I don't represent any of my opinions to be absolute facts, and this video is for educational purposes only, aka please don't sue me. So with the disclaimer out the way, this brings us to our first case study. Chapter 2, Empowerment Washing in Action, the illusion of safety, science, and support. One app in particular really stood out to me because their messaging is so compelling. This much-loved app has branded itself as a rebellion, relatable, feminist, privacy-focused, superior, a safe space, and a tool for sovereignty in a post-Roe world. Stardust is quite simply beautiful. It's gorgeously designed and deeply resonant with users who have ever felt alienated by clinical, sterile health tools. It attracts spiritual feminists, astrology lovers, and their branding attracts those who care about privacy and reproductive autonomy. With its cosmic aesthetic, affirming notifications, and anti-patriarchal tone, it doesn't just track your period, it's designed to speak to the deeper parts of who you are and helps you to feel truly seen. It's not hard to see why people love it.
Hey bestie, you deserve a period tracker that gets you. We're Stardust, a woman-led, woman-owned, woman-built, data encrypted.
Your data is encrypted.
Your data is encrypted.
We've implemented an encrypted wall.
It is encrypted.
We possibly have the best security of any period tracker.
We probably have the best security out there at this point.
We're a tiny female-founded period tracker. We are women-owned.
We are women-owned. We're a small team of women.
We were so creeped out that all the big period trackers out there were owned by men.
Giant male-owned period trackers.
Giant male-owned corporation.
We were creeped out that other period trackers were selling our data. We have never sold your data. We have never sold your data. We are one of the only cycle trackers that has not sold user data. Now would be a good time to stop using all the period trackers that have sold your data and switch to Stardust.
But behind the very beautiful interface and the compelling branding, the story appears to be very different. The app is the perfect example of what happens when empowerment becomes strategic branding instead of a foundation, when feminist messaging is used as marketing rather than a mission. Stardust really took off in the wake of Roe v. Wade, where they stepped into the spotlight with a bold claim. It was the first period tracker to offer end-to-end encryption of your intimate data. On TikTok, Instagram, and across the App Store listing, it positioned itself as a privacy-first, women-owned alternative, a space where you could safely log your most intimate data without the fear of it being sold, subpoenaed, or shared. It was timely and deeply marketable. The timing and messaging created a viral moment for Stardust, which landed it the #1 spot in the App Store's health category. But as I looked closer, things didn't quite align. The company claimed end-to-end encryption, but investigations by TechCrunch revealed that the encryption keys were stored on Stardust's own servers, undermining the very definition of end-to-end encryption. In other words, they could still access user data if they needed to, or chose to. Then there was the privacy policy itself. At one point, Stardust privacy policy stated that they would comply with law enforcement data requests whether or not legally required. After Vice reached out with concerns, this wording was quietly changed to say they would only comply when legally required. But privacy claims are not the only issue. The app is marketed as free, which raises a valid question. What exactly is the revenue model? After all, these apps need to make money somehow. How does a privacy-first app without ads generate revenue? Sure, there is a paid tier. However, there really isn't much substance behind the paywall. I outlined the lack of value in my comparison video. So if most users aren't paying with money, then what are they paying with? This is something I cover later on in the video. For me, what I found most interesting was the issue of what Stardust claims to offer. Here's how it presents itself in the App Store. Stardust is a free period, pregnancy, and hormone tracker health app. We integrate science, ancient wisdom, astronomy, and AI to help you understand the magic of your cycle, whether you are trying to predict your period or ovulation, get pregnant, track pregnancy, Stardust has you covered. It's poetic and alluring, yes, but it wraps health advice in mystical language, blurring the line between science and symbolism. As a fertility scientist who's researched cycle tracking apps in great detail, I have some very valid critiques and concerns. Firstly, it claims science, but what is the scientific foundation of its predictions? Also, what component is AI? Is it the oddly specific daily notifications or something clinically meaningful? Important Importantly, Stardust does not appear to employ a scientific or medical team in-house. In fact, they don't appear to have ever employed any scientific or medical team in the history of the app. What I observe is that the publicly visible team leans heavily into branding, growth, and product design. Yes, there is an advisory board, but advisory boards often have a very limited involvement. Their contribution is not enough to shape the core development, and their role is often more symbolic than functional. The presence of an advisory board is not a guarantee of scientific integrity. For many users, buzzwords like AI and science suggest academic rigor, algorithms trained on data, and models tested for accuracy. But in Stardust's case, there's no explanation of how insights are generated or what qualifies them to be scientific. Without transparency, these terms function more as signals of legitimacy rather than demonstrations of it. And when it comes to health and fertility claims, there's not just a branding issue, it's an ethical one. In the App Store update dated March 17, 2025, Stardust announced improved temperature tracking and syncing with Oura Ring to track basal body temperature, promising personalized cycle insights and pattern detection. This kind of language strongly implies the use of a science-backed algorithm, and because basal body temperature is used specifically to confirm ovulation, this may lead users to believe that the app can offer meaningful information about their fertile window. However, in my personal experience entering basal body temperature data into the app, it provided no cycle adjustments based on basal body temperature. It repeatedly glitched, deleted data, and did not accurately predict my ovulation. The app, however, had the complete irresponsible audacity to tell me if I had a low, medium, or high chance of pregnancy that didn't appear to be based on any of my personal data.
You can see the chances of pregnancy on your home screen: low chance, medium chance, high chance, if you're trying to avoid conception or if you're trying to conceive.
As a consumer, scientist, and women's health advocate, this makes my blood boil. And I can't even begin to tell you how ethically wrong this is. So if the app doesn't have the capacity to handle this data, why have this feature in the first place? Disclaimers aside that the app should not be used as contraceptive, why have very specific fertility modes that could influence users to misuse the app?
Currently, we have 5 different modes to track with, so let's break them all down. Standard period tracking. Next, we have our trying to conceive mode. The complete opposite side, we have preventing pregnancy.
This thoughtless design just creates unnecessary risk. My experience and findings suggest that there's actually no meaningful algorithm behind the interface. Stardust is a clear example of what feminist scholar Angela McRobbie calls post-feminist consumer culture, where brands use the language of empowerment without making real change, where the feeling of being seen replaces the reality of being supported. In her book, The Aftermath of Feminism, Angela explains how feminism is often used as a marketing tool. Companies and apps might say all of the right things, but behind the scenes, they still benefit from the same old systems that exploit women and leave them vulnerable. When Stardust markets itself to be a safe and reliable feminist space, but doesn't back that up with gold standard privacy protections, scientific rigor, or accountability, it's not care. It's either strategic branding or the actions of a startup blind to the responsibility they hold in this space, who don't seem to grasp what's at stake when you're handling and influencing the most intimate details of a woman's life.
We had like a boilerplate privacy policy that we found on the internet that was for all apps. We are just 2 girls. We're not even an evil corporation.
When you're handling other people's most intimate health data, naivety doesn't excuse the potential for harm. And this is why Stardust is the center of this chapter called empowerment washing. But here's the icing on the cake. The moment I knew without a doubt that this company was not what it appeared to be, it was when I saw their critiques being used as endorsements in their marketing. In the App Store and on their website, Stardust showcases logos from TechCrunch and Vice, media outlets that had published critical investigations into their privacy claims. These weren't articles of praise, they were exposés and warnings. Yet here they were, framed like badges of honor and credibility. This was the final confirmation that this wasn't just poor communication between their teams or startup growing pains. This appears to be intentionally misleading. It's branding, carefully packaged and curated to build trust, even if the trust was never truly earned. And to name all of this and call Stardust out feels incredibly uncomfortable for me, but also very necessary. As a women's women's health advocate, I am obliged to disrupt the whimsical illusion crafted by this app to fiercely protect what should be safe and respected. This isn't about tearing something down, it's about demanding honesty and transparency. I reached out to Stardust twice to give them a chance to clarify my findings. Both times they declined to respond. Our reproductive health and well-being is not something to be taken lightly. I just can't allow our trust to be treated as a brand asset, especially when that trust is built on a carefully crafted illusion. Stardust is only the first layer, a single example of how empowerment can be marketed without being meaningfully delivered. Chapter 3, the Vanishing Act. When an app disappears without explanation, users are left vulnerable with no support, no updates, and no answers. The next case study is Kindara. Founded in 2011 by a husband and wife team, it was one of the first digital tools created to support women in understanding their cycles through the fertility awareness method. Born from personal experience and a shared mission to advocate for body literacy, Kindara wasn't just another app. It became a defining tool for those charting their fertility with intention. It started out strong, but then in 2018, Kindara was acquired by a digital health company called Primatemp. The acquisition was described as strategic, but what we can observe today raises deeper concerns about whether Kindara's greatest asset was its product or its user base. Kindara's terms of use state that the company may sell, lease, or lend aggregated personal information to third parties and will not share any portion of its revenues generated by the use of personal information with users. And who are these third parties? Those who wish to study data collected by Kindara and companies marketing products and services to users. While the word aggregate suggests anonymity, the reality is that aggregate datasets can often be re-identified. This makes aggregate menstrual cycle data incredibly valuable to marketers, insurers, researchers, and basically anyone looking to profit from our most intimate information. Today, Kindara shows every sign of quiet abandonment. There have been no updates since 2021, and users report glitches, crashes, slow performance, and support requests that go unanswered. The company's social media channels have gone completely dark, and despite all of this, no official statement has been made about the status of the app. The app remains live, still downloadable, and still charging for premium features. According to Primatemp's own product page, Kindara has over 1.6 million users who typically open the app twice per day. Kindara is also being used as the digital infrastructure for Presto, a NIH-funded fertility study run by the Boston University, but yet no one seems to be maintaining the app. Upon acquisition, in his farewell post, one of the original founders, Will Sachs, noted that Kindara may have been the first FemTech company funded by venture capital, paving the way for others to follow. But today, that path feels precarious, because Kindara may also be one of the clearest examples of an ethical grey zone that emerges when an app is built not for longevity, but for acquisition. We'll dive deeper into that later in the video. For now, let's sit with this question. What happens when a health app ghosts its users, and not just any app, one that holds years of intimate cycle data, a deeply personal archive of trying, bleeding, conceiving, and grieving? What happens if one day it's all gone without notice? No goodbye, no support, no way to retrieve what matters most. As we'll unpack later in this video, there's little accountability for apps that act in bad faith. In FemTech, it's starting to seem as though responsibility is optional. Kindara hasn't shut down yet, but it hasn't shown up either. Chapter 4, a pattern emerges. It would be easy to dismiss Stardust and Kindara as anomalies, but these are just two examples of a sea of many that are part of a larger pattern, a systemic failure in the femtech industry. A critical analysis of menstrual cycle tracking apps found that many apps appear to engage in opaque or misleading data practices. Privacy policies were vague, often obscuring how and with whom sensitive health data was shared with. This lack of clarity not only undermines user trust, but creates uneven risk, especially for those who are living in jurisdictions where reproductive health data could be used against them. Scientific credibility is another key failure point. Two separate 2016 evaluations assessed the scientific validity of menstrual cycle tracking apps. The first study evaluated 95 fertility apps and found that only 6 met the criteria for evidence-based design. The second study reviewed 108 apps and found that few referenced medical literature or adequately involved health professionals in their development. Across both studies, most apps relied on proprietary algorithms that had never been peer-reviewed or offered little transparency transparency about how health information was sourced. Yes, these tools were easy to use, but poorly built for the job they claim to do. Another concern is what happens beneath the surface. Some apps publicly promise privacy and data protection while quietly sharing sensitive information with third parties. The controversy around Flow, one of the most downloaded menstrual cycle tracking apps in the world, exemplifies these risks. In 2021, the app settled with the Federal Trade Commission after it shared personally identifiable user data alongside sensitive health information with Facebook and Google, despite explicitly promising not to in its privacy policy. Another example is Glow, who faced similar scrutiny in 2020 when the California Attorney General's office reached settlement with the company for failing to adequately protect user data. Investigators found significant security flaws that allowed reproductive health information to be accessed without proper authentication. The platform also misrepresented the safety of its privacy policies, giving users a false sense of security while exposing them to risk. As part of the settlement, Glow was required to pay $250,000 in penalties, making this one of the first major legal actions taken against a FemTech company for violating user trust and highlighting just how unregulated this space remains. These are not the actions of simply rogue developers or bad actors. They are symptoms of a system optimized for scale, not care. The FemTech market is projected to reach $102 billion by 2028. This isn't a niche space anymore. This is a high-growth market that attracts serious investment. And when growth is the priority, ethical design often becomes secondary. As feminist science and technology scholars Judy Wackman and Donna Haraway remind us, technology is never neutral. It reflects the values, incentives, and blind spots of its creators. In FemTech, this often looks like beautiful design and friendly branding that offers the feeling of reliability without the structural integrity to support it. There is a growing body of academic and journalistic discourse calling for a fundamental re-evaluation of how FemTech products are designed, funded, and governed. While few papers explicitly address the role of venture capital, it's observable that many FemTech startups follow a growth-orientated model, relying on user acquisition, data collection, and engagement metrics to attract investment. In this context, trust and scientific rigor likely becomes secondary to scale and monetization. Though menstrual cycle tracking apps are frequently marketed as health tools, beneath the surface, many appear to operate a data-driven business model where the real product is user interaction, where companies leverage data to create new revenue streams. In a time of machine learning and artificial intelligence, data is more valuable than ever. And when sensitive health data is collected outside the clinical safeguards, the consequences for privacy, safety, and well-being can be significant. If FemTech operated like a regulated medical space, these failures might carry consequences, but it doesn't. So the risk for these companies is low. Most FemTech companies live in the margins, outside of clinical oversight and beyond the reach of meaningful regulations. They're not required to meet medical standards or transparently disclose data sharing practices. Accountability is minimal and transparency is optional. This has become a Wild West centered around blind trust and women's most intimate health data. So while Stardust's flawed encryption claims and questionable marketing practices and Kindara's quiet disappearance after its acquisition might seem like isolated issues, they're not. They expose the systemic loopholes and a growing constellation of failures in a fractured system. And that brings us to the apex of the problem. Weak regulation creates opportunity, and too many apps have learned to exploit it. Chapter 5, the loophole, the illusion of safety and the cost of manufactured trust. When it comes to data protection, the General Data Protection Regulation, or GDPR, is seen as the gold standard. Introduced in the EU, it was designed to give users more control over their personal data and to hold companies accountable for how that data was handled. On paper, it appears reassuring. And for a long time, I believed the words GDPR compliant actually meant something. But here's what most users don't realize. The rules are surprisingly easy to bend. In App Store listings and privacy policies, GDPR compliant is worn like a badge of honor. It's meant to reassure you, to say, this is safe, you can trust us. Some apps even have dedicated web pages to convince you that they're trustworthy. But just because a company claims compliance doesn't mean they're operating with your best interests at heart. I first opened this can of worms when I saw that Clue, an app I have personally used and trusted for many years, proudly state on their website that they are regulated by the GDPR, which made me pause for a second to look deeper, because that interesting and very specific choice of wording is simply not true. It implies that the GDPR is regularly scrutinizing or auditing the privacy systems these apps claim to uphold. The GDPR is a legal framework. It doesn't regulate in real time like you might think. It doesn't perform routine audits. It doesn't vet apps before they launch. There's no governing body monitoring the back end of these apps or checking if their encryption claims hold up. It's not an active oversight. It's a set of guidelines that companies can self-declare to follow without anyone checking if it's actually true. So when a company says it's GDPR compliant, what it really means is we wrote a privacy policy and we promise that we're following it. So many of these apps are using the language of safety, encryption, compliance, empowerment, and the deeper I looked, the more I realized this isn't happening by accident. It appears to be happening by design. Because the GDPR is reactive, it steps in only after harm is done. It relies on someone being able to prove damage, to navigate a legal system most of us don't even understand. There's no proactive checks, no routine audits, no one confirming that these companies are doing what they claim, and that's the loophole. Apps are free to market themselves as wellness tools to avoid medical regulation. They get to use vague privacy language to avoid accountability. But there's still one more layer to peel back. A lot of these apps say, we don't sell your data, and they say it like it's a promise, like it should just settle the conversation. But have you ever noticed almost none of them say, we don't share your data? And that's the trap door, because sharing is still a business model and often a very profitable one. Your data can be shared with trusted partners, affiliate networks, and analytics firms, not sold but leveraged, monetized, and used. Tech companies sell insights generated from your data. Others use it to build lookalike audiences for targeted advertising, or they offer anonymized aggregate data, which, as we discussed earlier, aggregated data has been proven to be re-identifiable. The more user data they collect, the better their analytics. The better their analytics, the higher their valuation, which is the perfect situation if you're building an app to be acquired, just like Kindara. This isn't just about privacy policies and misleading marketing, it's also about power, consent, and who profits from your body's most intimate details. That's why transparency and protection matters. This is about our health, our autonomy, and our reproductive futures. FemTech isn't just collecting data, it's collecting information so intimate and so uniquely female. Cycle patterns, symptoms, libido, pregnancy, and loss. This kind of continuous women's health data has never been captured at this scale before, not by medical systems and not by research institutions. And yet we're being groomed to hand it over, not to doctors, not to public health, but to tech companies. Many with little accountability, poor handling, and mixed intentions. What kind of future does that build for women's health? What are we agreeing to now without fully understanding the long-term cost? These are questions we don't yet have the answers to. I don't have the answers to, but they're worth asking. Because in a system this unregulated, where data is currency and privacy is a sales pitch, how confident can we really be that our most intimate information won't be used against us? What we're giving away feels small, a symptom, a date, a mood, but layer by layer, it builds a record of our bodies, one that could shape the decisions about our health, our rights, and our autonomy. And if that data lands in the wrong hands, for example, an insurer, an employer, or a government agency, the consequences could reach far beyond what any of us intended. Once these apps share your data through partnerships, analytics firms, or under the banner of de-identified data, it moves through systems beyond their control. And the companies passing it on, they may never fully grasp where it actually ends up, or what it could one day be used for. It's unrealistic to say that all apps are bad, but in this current tech climate, it's actually impossible to tell the difference, because everything looks trustworthy. When the interface is polished and the promises are soothing and the science sounds just believable enough, it becomes harder to tell when something isn't right. And that's what makes this so dangerous. So what now? We were promised empowerment, and in many ways we found it. These apps provided a way to finally understand what we were never taught about our cycles, our hormones, and our bodies. And on the surface, many of them delivered, but that's only half of the story, because it's not just about what they give us, it's also about what they take and how easily they profit from our trust placed in a system with no real accountability. It's a bait and switch, plain and simple. They present as wellness tools, but function as data businesses. Whether it's absent medical oversight, despite unreliable algorithms, misleading marketing, or the illusion of privacy. What looks like care is often strategy. So what now? It leaves us in a moment worth pausing for, to ask what level of care and respect we deserve from these tools that handle our most intimate data, and what it would mean to build technologies rooted in respect, transparency, and function. There's no clear answer of where to go from here, but maybe that's not the point. Maybe the point is to simply keep asking, to shine light on the current reality of this industry, and to know that when something feels off, when trust is being asked but not earned, we can step back and say, we want better. You might be wondering what I personally use now, or if I still use these apps at all, and the honest answer is it's complicated, because I'm a huge believer in what menstrual cycle tracking apps offer, in the potential they hold for self-knowledge, agency, and connection with our bodies, all of the original promises. But after everything I've learned, I don't feel comfortable recommending any specific app. I simply don't know who to trust, which is a huge shame for any apps that are built on integrity, because I would love to know for sure who I can trust and endorse. I've personally used Clue for many years, and I still hold hope that they're trying to do the right thing. If you're concerned about privacy, the best thing you can do is go into your app settings and look for what you can control. None of this is perfect, but asking questions is powerful. And even in a system that hasn't earned our trust, we can still choose to be discerning. I think everyone needs to use a method that suits their lifestyle. And if an app really is the only way you'll be able to realistically track your cycle, then there's no shame in using them. For me, paper tracking suits my lifestyle and the awareness I already have with my own body, so my plan is to transition completely to paper. I've created a video which I'll link below that shows you step by step how to track on paper if this is what you feel called to do. I just want to say that cycle tracking is such an important experience to understand ourselves, our bodies, and our fertility. Understanding your cycle is such an amazing way to connect with yourself, to meet your needs and plan your life in a way that allows you to truly thrive. My analysis of these apps remind us that real empowerment isn't just about the pretty interface or poetic notifications. It's about transparency, trust, and integrity, and the willingness to look beyond the marketing and ask the harder questions. If you've made it this far into the video, thank you so much for being part of this conversation and sharing your attention with me. I'd love to hear your experience in the comments below. I'll be reading every single comment. So that's all for today. I hope to see you again in another video, which will definitely be more lighthearted than this one. Until then, take care.